The sirens of midnight echoed through the city's narrow alleys. In a mansion on the hill, surrounded by guards and black cars, the atmosphere was tense, the kind of silence that follows power and fear. Inside that mansion lived Vincenzo Marino, one of the most feared mafia bosses on the East Coast. To his men, he was a god. To the city, a ghost. But to one person in the world, he was just a father. And tonight, that father was breaking. In a massive room filled with medical machines, his only son, Matteo, lay unconscious. Tubes ran from his body, his pale face motionless under the dim lights. The boy was just 16, young, bright, and the only thing human about Vincenzo Marino's ruthless empire. Around the bed stood doctors, dozens of them, some in white coats from Italy, others flown in from Germany, Russia, and Japan. The room smelled of antiseptic and failure. For 2 months, these doctors had tried everything, every medicine, every machine, every prayer, but Matteo's condition only worsened. Vincenzo stood near the bed, his hand trembling slightly as he looked at his son's face. "Why can't you fix him?" His voice was cold, but beneath it was desperation. A doctor swallowed hard. "Mr. Marino, his brain infection has spread beyond what medicine can repair. We've done everything possible." "Then do the impossible!" Vincenzo snapped, his dark eyes burning. But even the best had failed. He turned away, covering his face. For the first time in years, the mafia boss looked powerless. His empire could buy silence, fear, and loyalty, but not life. Outside the mansion's gates, life looked very different. Every morning, Lucille Johnson, a middle-aged black woman, arrived quietly through the servants' entrance. She worked as a cleaner in the mansion, dusting rooms, washing marble floors, and pretending not to notice the guns hidden in drawers or the whispers in the hallways. She had learned one thing fast: never ask questions, never make eye contact with the boss. Lucille's daughter, Ariana, was everything she wasn't: bold, brilliant, and endlessly curious. At 22, Ariana was studying medicine at a small university nearby. She'd earned her scholarship through hard work, juggling classes during the day and tutoring kids at night. Her dream was to become a neurosurgeon, to fix what others give up on, she used to say. Every evening when her mother came home, Ariana would listen to her stories about the mansion with too many secrets. She didn't know exactly who her mother worked for, and Lucille preferred it that way. But one night, everything changed. Lucille came home later than usual, her hands trembling as she set down her cleaning gloves. "Mama, what happened?" Ariana asked. Her mother's voice shook. "It's that boy, the boss's son. He's dying. They brought in so many doctors, so many, but nobody can help. I saw them, crying, those men in white coats." Ariana froze. "Crying?" Lucille nodded. "I've never seen rich people cry like that. It's like they already buried him." That night, Ariana couldn't sleep. Her mind kept racing with possibilities. She'd just finished studying about rare neuroinfections that mimic coma symptoms. The thought wouldn't leave her. What if they missed something? Doctors sometimes get lost in protocols, she knew. Sometimes what looked impossible just needed a fresh pair of eyes. But this was a mafia family. Getting close to them was unthinkable. 2 days later, Lucille returned to work, only to find the mansion darker than ever. Guards whispered. The sound of crying echoed from upstairs. Matteo's condition had worsened. The doctors had started leaving, one after another, afraid to be blamed for failure. That afternoon, as Lucille was cleaning the hallway near the infirmary, the door suddenly opened. A man in a black suit, one of Vincenzo's bodyguards, barked, "Get out of here!" Lucille froze, but before she could move, she heard Vincenzo's voice inside. "Get me another doctor. I don't care from where. Just bring someone who can make him breathe again." Lucille's heart pounded. She walked quickly to the service area and pulled out her phone. She dialed Ariana. "Baby, I need you to listen carefully. Don't ask questions. You remember that boy I told you about?" "Yes, the sick one. I think they're about to give up on him. They're sending people away. If you ever wanted to see what real medicine can do, this is it. But it's dangerous." Ariana hesitated. "You mean go there? To that mansion?" "Yes, but you can't tell anyone, and if they catch you—" "I'll be fine," Ariana interrupted softly. "If someone's dying and nobody can help, maybe I can." That evening, dressed in her white lab coat and carrying her small medical kit, Ariana arrived quietly through the back gate with her mother. The guards frowned, but let Lucille pass. "She's with me," Lucille said firmly, her hands shaking. They entered through the servants' corridor, heartbeats echoing like footsteps of fate. When Ariana stepped into Mateo's room, the smell of antiseptic hit her immediately. Machines beeped weakly. The boy's breathing was shallow. The remaining doctor, exhausted, sat in a corner scribbling notes, barely noticing her. Vincenzo stood by the window, smoke curling through the air. When he turned and saw the unfamiliar young woman, his brows furrowed. "Who's this?" he demanded. Lucille immediately lowered her head. "Sir, she's my daughter. She's studying medicine. She just wanted to—" "Enough. This isn't a classroom. Take her out before she—" But before he could finish, Ariana stepped forward. Her voice was calm but steady. "Sir, please, just 5 minutes. Let me look at him. You've got nothing to lose anymore." The room went silent. Even the machines seemed to pause. One of the guards laughed quietly. "Boss, she's a kid. You really gonna let a janitor's daughter touch your son?" Vincenzo's jaw clenched. He glared at Ariana, this small, dark-skinned girl with eyes full of fire. He wanted to throw her out. But then, Mateo's monitor beeped irregularly, his heartbeat faltering. A flicker of fear crossed Vincenzo's face. He swallowed hard. 5 minutes. If you hurt him, you don't walk out." Ariana nodded and put on her gloves. Her mother stood frozen, tears in her eyes. She moved with precision, not like a student, but like someone who believed. She checked Mateo's pupils, his neck, his spinal reflexes. Then she asked for his previous test results. The remaining doctor scoffed. "We've run every test. You won't find anything new." Ariana ignored him. Her eyes landed on the blood work reports. Something caught her attention. "These values, they don't match the infection you're treating him for. You're targeting the wrong thing." "What?" the doctor snapped. "This isn't bacterial meningitis. It's an autoimmune encephalitis. The body's attaching his brain, not a virus. The antibiotics are only making him weaker." Vincenzo frowned. "Speak English." She looked at him. "Your son isn't dying because of a germ. His own immune system is shutting his brain down. But I can fix it. If I have access to corticosteroids and an IV immunoglobulin setup." The room went dead silent. Even the skeptical doctor looked stunned. That would explain the resistance to treatment," he whispered. "But that's almost impossible to diagnose without believing it's possible," Ariana intercunned. Vincenzo stared at her for a long time. Then he looked at his son, pale, motionless, dying. He clenched his jaw and nodded. "Do it." Within minutes, the staff brought what she asked for. Ariana started the treatment, explaining every step, her hands steady despite the tension around her. Hours passed. Vincenzo didn't leave her side once. The room, once filled with hopelessness, now pulsed with a faint rhythm of faith. By dawn, Mateo's breathing stabilized. The monitor beeped stronger, steadier. For the first time in months, there was color in his cheeks. Lucille wept silently. The doctor stared at the machine in disbelief. And Vincenzo.
The mafia boss, who had ordered deaths without blinking, suddenly fell to his knees beside the bed, whispering, "Please, God, don't take my boy." Ariana stepped back, exhausted. "He's not out of danger yet," she said softly, "but he's fighting now, and this time he has a chance." Vincenzo lifted his eyes to her, and in them was something no one had seen in years: gratitude. He whispered, "Who are you?" She looked at him quietly. "Just the cleaning lady's daughter."
The morning sun broke through the mansion's heavy curtains, spilling gold light across the marble floor. For the first time in weeks, there was no shouting, no sirens, no panic. Just the steady, rhythmic beeping of Mateo's heart monitor. Stronger, clearer, alive. Lucille sat silently in the corner, her hands clasped together in prayer. Her daughter, Ariana, was asleep in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on her folded arms. She had been awake all night, adjusting the IVs, monitoring Mateo's vitals, whispering to him like he could hear her. When Vincenzo Marino entered the room that morning, everyone fell silent. The guards straightened, the staff froze. His eyes, usually sharp and cold, softened as he looked at his son, breathing, alive. He stood there for a long moment, saying nothing. Then, for the first time anyone could remember, the mafia boss smiled. He turned to the young woman sleeping by his son's bed. "Wake her," he said quietly. Lucille hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't slept in—" "Wake her," Vincenzo repeated, though his tone was gentle. Ariana stirred at the sound of footsteps. She blinked, confused for a moment, before realizing where she was. Then she saw him, the man everyone feared, standing before her with eyes full of something almost human. He spoke softly. "My son's heartbeat. It's stronger." Ariana nodded, straightening her coat. "Yes, sir. The treatment is working. His body is responding better than I expected, but he'll need close monitoring for the next 72 hours. Vincenzo took a slow breath, still staring at Mateo. "You did what 100 doctors couldn't." "It wasn't magic," she said modestly. "It was just looking at him differently." He looked at her, really looked at her. This young woman who came from nowhere, daughter of a woman who scrubbed his floors, had just given him something no one else could. Hope. He said suddenly, "You'll stay here until my son wakes up." Lucille's eyes widened. "Sir, she has her classes, her studies." Vincenzo raised his hand. "Whatever she needs, she'll have. Money, books, lab equipment, name it, as long as she keeps my son alive." Ariana hesitated. "Mr. Marino, I didn't do this for payment." He smiled faintly. "Everyone does something for something. Think about what you want, and you'll get it." But Ariana wasn't thinking about rewards. She was thinking about responsibility. Mateo's survival now depended on her, and the thought both terrified and inspired her. That day, the mansion changed. The staff whispered about the girl who saved the boss's son. Guards who once ignored Lucille now nodded respectfully when she passed. And in the medical room, Ariana transformed chaos into care, organizing files, replacing outdated medicines, and keeping detailed logs of Mateo's progress. Mateo's condition improved little by little. By the third day, he could move his fingers. By the fifth, his eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was the faint outline of Ariana leaning over him, checking his pulse. Her face was calm but focused, a halo of sunlight behind her. His voice cracked. Who are you?" She smiled softly. "A friend. Rest. You've been asleep for a long time." He blinked weakly, trying to remember. The last thing he recalled was darkness, then pain. Now there was light, warmth, and a stranger who didn't look afraid of him.
Vincenzo entered the room moments later, and when he saw his son's eyes open, his body trembled. "Matteo!" He rushed to his side, gripping his hand. For a man used to commanding armies, that single moment broke him down completely. Tears slid down his cheeks. "You came back to me." Matteo smiled faintly. "Hi, Papa." The guards outside pretended not to hear the sound of their boss crying. They had seen him angry, ruthless, even merciful, but never vulnerable. Over the next week, Ariana became a constant presence in the mansion. She oversaw every dose, adjusted every monitor, and even encouraged Matteo to sit up and talk. Her knowledge impressed everyone, even the skeptical senior doctors Vincenzo later rehired just to observe her methods. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Matteo sat by the window while Ariana checked his vitals. "Do you really think I'll be able to walk again?" he asked quietly. She looked up. "You already took your first step, Matteo. The rest is just practice." He smiled. "I sound like my mom used to." There was a silence between them, the kind that holds both comfort and sorrow. Ariana didn't ask about his mother. She didn't need to. She could see the grief in his eyes. Then curiously, he asked, "You're not scared of my father?" Ariana chuckled softly. "Should I be?" Matteo grinned weakly. "Everyone is." She met his eyes. Everyone's scared until they see the man behind the myth. That night, Vincenzo watched them from the doorway. His son smiling again, and this girl sitting beside him, calm and fearless. It stirred something in him he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Later, he called Ariana to his office. The room was dim, lit by the glow of a single lamp and the faint city lights outside. On the walls hung photographs of power, men in suits, handshakes worth millions, and eyes that told stories of blood and loyalty. Vincenzo poured himself a drink. "Sit." Ariana hesitated, then obeyed. He studied her for a long time before speaking. "You don't act like someone afraid to die." She tilted her head slightly. "I don't plan to die anytime soon." He chuckled. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, bold, confident. Except I didn't save lives, I took them." Ariana's eyes didn't flinch. "And do you regret that?" His hand paused on the glass. "Every night." The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but honest. Then he leaned back. "Tell me something. If you're this smart, this talented, why are you living in that neighborhood? Why isn't some fancy hospital offering you a future?" Ariana smiled faintly. "Because people like me have to work twice as hard to be noticed. My mom cleans houses so I can study. I'm not ashamed of that." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years saw something pure, something untouched by greed or power. "I've spent my life protecting my empire, but I couldn't protect my own blood. Then you walked in and did it like it was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," she said softly. "It was everything." Weeks passed. Matteo grew stronger each day. He started walking short distances, laughing more, living again. The mansion that once echoed with silence now rang with his laughter. Lucille watched her daughter in awe. How effortlessly she balanced kindness with courage. Sometimes when she caught Vincenzo looking at Ariana with quiet admiration, her mother's heart tightened with both pride and fear. One evening, as Ariana packed her medical kit, Vincenzo approached her. "You've done what no one else could. My son is alive because of you. I owe you everything." Ariana shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. Just be a better father. That's all he needs." He smiled faintly. "You really think a man like me can change?" She met his eyes. "Everyone can, if they want to." That night, after Ariana left, Vincenzo sat alone in his study, staring at a photo of his younger self holding Matteo as a baby. Her words echoed in his mind. Be a better father. The next morning, the city woke to a rumor that shocked everyone. Vincenzo Marino, the untouchable mafia boss, had quietly withdrawn from several illegal operations. His lieutenants whispered about it, confused even, angry. The boss is getting soft, one muttered. That girl's turning him into a saint. But Vincenzo didn't care. For the first time in his life, he was learning to value something other than power. Ariana continued visiting the mansion, checking on Matteo regularly. The boy had grown attached to her, not in a childish way, but with deep gratitude. Sometimes they talked about dreams, other times about fear. One afternoon, as she prepared to leave, Matteo stopped her. Ariana, when I get better, I want to study medicine too. She turned, smiling. Really? He nodded. If people like you can change the world, maybe I can too. A tear formed in her eye. Then you already healed, Matteo, because you found purpose. From the doorway, Vincenzo watched them, his heart heavy with something he hadn't felt in decades. He turned away before they could see the emotion on his face. For the first time in years, the house of crime had become a house of hope.
It was strange how quickly peace could turn into danger. Weeks had passed since Matteo's recovery, and the Marino mansion, once a fortress of fear, now carried laughter, conversation, and life. Guards smiled more. The staff walked with ease. The boss himself had started reading books again, sipping espresso in the mornings like an ordinary man. But in the shadows, not everyone was happy about the change. Among Vincenzo's closest lieutenants was Marco Rinaldi, a man known for his temper and ambition. For years he had been the right hand, loyal when it benefited him, silent when it didn't. And lately he had been watching the cleaning lady's daughter with growing resentment. "Ever since that girl came here," he said one night to another soldier, "the boss has gone soft. He's cutting business ties, dropping deals, ignoring money, all because of her." The soldier shrugged nervously. "She saved his son. You can't blame him for—" "I can blame whoever I want. This isn't a church. This is the MAFIA. And if the boss forgets who he is, someone has to remind him." Ariana had no idea of the storm building around her. To her, life felt like a rare moment of calm. Between her university rotations and regular visits to the Marino mansion, she had found purpose. Matteo's progress amazed her. He was walking unassisted now, his laughter filling the halls that once echoed with death. One afternoon, as she entered the study with new reports, she overheard Vincenzo speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes," he said firmly, "I'm done with that line of work. I don't care how much money it brings. My son's life showed me what matters. If you can't accept it, find another family to do business with." His voice carried authority, but beneath it was conviction, the kind that scared men like Marco Rinaldi. When he saw Ariana at the door, Vincenzo hung up and smiled faintly. "Come in. You're just in time. Matteo's results, how are they?" She handed him the report. "Excellent. He's responding perfectly. No relapse signs." Vincenzo exhaled slowly, relief washing over his face. "You have given me something I can never repay." She smiled softly. "You already did, Mr. Marino. You listened." He chuckled. "You remind me of my late wife. She believed every soul could be saved, even mine." "She was right," Ariana said quietly. For a moment silence filled the room, the kind that holds unspoken truths. Vincenzo looked at her and wondered how someone so young could carry such wisdom. And for Ariana, seeing this man soften day by day was proof that kindness could reach even the darkest hearts. But not all hearts were ready to change. That same night, Marco met secretly with 2 other lieutenants in a dimly lit bar downtown. "She's poisoning him," Marco said bitterly. "The boss doesn't listen to us anymore. That girl, she's got him wrapped around a little finger." One of the men hesitated. "She's just a student, Marco. You can't—" Marco slammed his glass on the table. "She's a threat. Today it's the cleaning lady's daughter. Tomorrow she'll be the boss's new conscience. You know what happens to men who grow a conscience in our business?" The others exchanged nervous glances. They knew what he meant. The Mafia didn't survive on compassion. It thrived on control. Marco leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "We remind the boss where his loyalties belong, and if that girl gets in the way, she disappears." The next morning, Ariana arrived at the mansion as usual, unaware of the silent eyes following her every step. Lucille noticed it first, the change in the air, the tension among the guards. "Baby," she whispered as they cleaned the kitchen together, "I don't like how they look at you. You should be careful." Ariana smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Mama. They just don't understand. People fear what they don't know." Her mother sighed. "And sometimes that fear kills." Later that day, as Ariana checked Mateo's vitals, the boy grinned. "You've basically become family now. Dad listens to you more than his own men." Ariana laughed softly. "Maybe that's because I tell him the truth." "Well," Mateo said teasingly, "if you ever need protection, you've got the Mafia on your side." She smiled at the irony. "Let's hope I never need it." But fate, as always, was listening. That evening, Vincenzo was hosting a quiet dinner, a small gathering of his top men. Ariana had been invited, partly as an honored guest, partly as a symbol of change. She wore a simple white dress, elegant but modest. Lucille had ironed it for her hands trembling with both pride and worry. As she entered the grand dining room, the atmosphere was heavy. Men in suits sat around a long mahogany table, their expressions unreadable. Vincenzo stood at the head, raising a glass. "To life, to family, and to second chances." The men raised their glasses reluctantly. Marco's smile, however, did not reach his eyes. As the dinner went on, conversation flowed about business, politics, Mateo's health. Ariana mostly listened, occasionally answering Vincenzo's curious questions about medicine and ethics. But she could feel Marco's stare, cold, sharp, lingering. Every time she glanced his way, he was watching her like a predator sizing up prey. After dinner, as the guests began to leave, Marco approached Vincenzo. "Boss, a word?" They stepped aside near the hallway. Ariana overheard just enough to feel the chill in his tone. "Some of us are concerned," Marco began. "You're changing things. People are asking questions. You're closing deals, cutting ties, ignoring money, all because of her." Vincenzo's eyes narrowed. "Since when do my decisions need approval?" Marco lowered his voice. "Since those decisions might get us all killed. You think the other families will just let you walk away? You're forgetting who you are." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. "No, Marco. I'm remembering who I should have been." "Because of her? The girl? The janitor's kid?" Vincenzo's blare could cut steel. "Careful what you say." Marco leaned in. "She's changing you, boss. And in our world, change gets you killed." He walked away, leaving the words hanging like poison in the air. That night, Ariana stayed late in Mateo's room, checking his medication. The storm outside mirrored the unease inside the mansion. Thunder cracked across the sky as rain began to fall. Suddenly, the power flickered. The lights went out. The machines beeped once, and then went silent.
Power outage, Ariana muttered, trying to stay calm. She reached for the emergency lamp and froze. A shadow moved behind her. "Who's there?" she asked quietly. A voice whispered from the dark, low and dangerous. "You should never have come here, little doctor." Before she could react, a hand grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back. She gasped in pain. "Let go!" The figure dragged her toward the window. But just then, the door burst open. "Hey!" It was Matteo, pale but on his feet, holding his IV pole like a weapon. The attacker turned. A glint of metal flashed in his hand. Ariana screamed. But before the blade could fall, another voice thundered through the room. "Drop it!" Vincenzo. The lights flickered back on just as the attacker froze. It was one of Vincenzo's men. Within seconds, guards flooded the room. The man was disarmed and thrown to the floor. Vincenzo's face was unreadable as he looked at him. "Who sent you?" He hesitated. Then, trembling, he whispered, "Marco!" The room went still. Vincenzo turned slowly, his fury colder than ice. "Find him and bring him to me." Later that night, Ariana sat in the corner of Matteo's room, shaken but unharmed. Vincenzo entered quietly, his face tight with rage and regret. "I should have known," he said bitterly. "The sickness isn't gone, it's just changed faces." Ariana looked up at him. "Don't blame yourself. You're trying to change, and not everyone can handle that." He shook his head. "No, I put you in danger. My world isn't safe for people like you." She stood, meeting his eyes. "Then change the world, Mr. Marino. Not just for me, for Matteo, for everyone who still believes people can be better." For the first time in his life, the Mafia boss didn't have a reply. He just nodded slowly and whispered, "You're stronger than you look, doctor." She smiled faintly. "And you're softer than you pretend." Outside, the storm began to clear. But everyone inside the mansion knew the real storm had only just begun. The night after the attack, the Marino mansion felt like a different world. Guards patrolled every hallway. Cameras blinked red from the ceilings. No one spoke above a whisper. The air, once filled with laughter and life, was heavy with tension again. But this time, the fear wasn't of illness, it was of betrayal. Vincenzo Marino sat alone in his study, staring at the rain-soaked window. His whiskey glass sat untouched. On the table in front of him lay a gun, not out of habit, but as a reminder. He had once built his empire on fear and silence. Now those same weapons had turned inward. The door opened quietly. It was Ariana. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her white coat slightly wrinkled, but her voice was steady. "Matteo's sleeping," she said softly, "his heart rate's normal again." Vincenzo nodded, but didn't look up. "And you? Are you all right?" She smiled faintly. "I've had worse days in the hospital, but I've never had someone try to stab me before." He looked at her then, guilt flickering behind his eyes. "You were right. My world can't be fixed with medicine." Ariana stepped closer. "But people can be, one at a time." He exhaled heavily, his voice breaking. "I've done terrible things, Ariana. You don't build an empire like mine without blood. But when my son got sick, none of it mattered. Not the money, not the power, nothing. You showed me that." She nodded. "Then prove it. End it before it ends you." He looked down at his gun and whispered, "Maybe that's exactly what I plan to do." At dawn, the house stirred awake to whispers. Marco Rinaldi had been found, dragged into the mansion by Vincenzo's men, beaten but alive. Vincenzo walked into the basement where Marco was tied to a chair. The once proud lieutenant looked up, his face swollen, his mouth bleeding. "Boss," he rasped, "you know I did what I had to do. You were losing control. That girl, she's—" Vincenzo slammed his fist into the wall, his voice thunderous. "That girl saved my son's life. She gave me back the only thing that mattered, and you repaid her with betrayal." Marco spat blood, laughing hoarsely. "You think she cares about you? You think she just showed up to play doctor? You don't even know who she is." Vincenzo froze. "What do you mean?" Marco grinned wickedly. "You should have checked before you brought her in. Her last name's Johnson, right? Ever wonder why she looks familiar?" "What do you mean, Marco?" Vincenzo demanded. Marco's smile widened. "Her father, Samuel Johnson. Remember that name?" The room went cold. Vincenzo's heart pounded. The name was like a ghost from another life, a name buried under years of blood and denial. "Samuel Johnson," he whispered. "That can't be." Marco leaned forward, triumphant despite his wounds. "You killed him 10 years ago. He was an accountant who tried to expose our money laundering. You sent your men. He died. And now his daughter's under your roof." The words hung in the air like thunder. Vincenzo's world spun. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. Could it be true? He remembered the name now, the case, the betrayal, the night he ordered a hit without blinking. It was business, just business. And now fate had brought the victim's daughter into his house, not for revenge, but to save his son. He turned to Marco, voice shaking. "If you're lying—" Marco smirked. "Check it yourself." Vincenzo's jaw clenched. "Take him away." Upstairs, Ariana was reviewing Matteo's blood work when the door burst open. Vincenzo entered, his face pale, eyes burning. "Ariana," he said, his voice low but trembling. "Your father, what was his name?" She frowned, confused. "Samuel Johnson. Why?" He closed his eyes. "And your mother? She's Lucille Johnson?" "Yes," she said slowly. "You know her? She works here." Vincenzo took a step back, running his hand through his hair. His breath came unevenly. Does she know who I am?" Ariana shook her head. "Only that you're rich and powerful. Why? What's wrong?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw not power, but shame. "Your father? He worked for my company once. There was an incident. He didn't survive." Ariana's eyes widened. "An incident?" He couldn't meet his gaze. "I was responsible. Not directly, but my order led to it. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he had a family. I'm sorry." The room fell silent. The machines hummed softly, the only sound between them. Ariana's throat tightened. She took a step back, her hands trembling. You killed my father?" Vincenzo's voice broke. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I might as well have. It was business back then. But I swear to you, if I could take it back—" Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't take it back." Matteo stirred in his bed, confused by the shouting. "Ariana, what's happening?" She turned to him, her face a storm of grief and fury. "Ask your father what he's done." Vincenzo reached out. "Please, Ariana." She stepped away. Don't touch me. Everything I did here, every moment I thought meant something was built on blood." She grabbed her bag, tears streaming down her face. "You wanted redemption, Mr. Marino? You can start by never seeing me again." Before he could stop her, she was gone. Lucille found her daughter in tears near the gates. "What happened?" she cried. "Why are you leaving?" Ariana's voice trembled. "He killed Dad, Mama. The man you've been cleaning for. He's the reason we lost everything." Lucille froze, her face draining of color. The truth hit her like a knife. She had scrubbed the blood of her husband's killer's house for years without knowing it. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. Ariana gripped her mother's hands. "We're leaving, tonight." They walked away from the mansion under the pale morning sky, mother and daughter, both broken by truths too heavy to carry. Inside the mansion, silence swallowed everything. Vincenzo stood at Matteo's bedside, haunted. "I took everything from her," he murmured, "and she gave me back my son." Matteo's voice was weak but steady. "Then give her back what she lost." Vincenzo looked at his son, his only remaining reason to keep living. "How do you repay a debt like that?" Matteo met his eyes. "Not with money, with change." For the next few days, the mansion was empty of laughter again. Matteo's recovery continued, but his spirit dimmed. He missed Ariana, her warmth, her honesty, her light. Meanwhile, Lucille returned to the hospital, trying to bury herself in work. But every time she touched a patient's hand, she remembered Matteo's smile. Every time she saw a father beside his child, she thought of the man she hated and pitied. She wanted to forget him, but her heart wouldn't let her. Then, one evening, Lucille came home holding a sealed envelope. "This came for you," she said quietly. Ariana opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The words were trembling, raw, almost broken. "Ariana, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, your father's death changed nothing in me back then. I was blind, ruthless. But saving my son, that changed everything. You showed me what true healing means. I've ended every illegal business tied to my name. The empire is gone. The money, the power, all of it. I've turned myself in to the authorities. Matteo will be safe, and my sins will finally have a cost. If redemption exists, it's because of you." Vincenzo Marino. Ariana stared at the letter, her hands shaking. He turned himself in. Lucille nodded softly. Sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to open it first. The next morning, news spread across the city. Mafia boss Vincenzo Marino, arrested after confession, declares he wants to end the cycle. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. Matteo stood outside, refusing to hide. When a journalist asked him, "Why did your father surrender?" he simply said, "Because someone finally showed him how to be human." That night, Ariana stood outside the hospital,
staring at the city lights. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but deep down she knew one thing: change had begun. The courtroom was silent. Every seat was filled. Reporters, lawmen, families, and faces from both sides of the city's broken heart. At the center sat Vincenzo Marino, the man who once ruled the underworld, now in a simple gray suit. His hands were cuffed. His eyes, however, were calm. It had been 2 months since his arrest. The empire was gone. Businesses sold, accounts frozen, property seized. For a man who once owned half the city, he now owned nothing but truth. But that truth, he believed, was his redemption. Across the aisle, Ariana Johnson sat beside her mother, Lucille. Both looked exhausted, yet composed. They hadn't come for revenge, not anymore. They came for closure. When Vincenzo entered, their eyes met. For a moment, time froze. He didn't expect forgiveness, but he needed her to see that he meant every word he had written. The prosecutor rose first, recounting years of corruption and violence. The defendant, Vincenzo Marino, built his fortune on fear. His hands may not have held every weapon, but his orders ended lives, including one Samuel Johnson, an innocent accountant. A hush fell. Ariana's breath caught at her father's name. Then when the judge turned to Vincenzo and asked if he wished to speak, he stood slowly. His voice was quiet but steady. "Your Honor, there's nothing I can say to undo what I've done. I spent years believing power made me untouchable, but when my son fell ill and 100 doctors failed him, I learned the truth." He looked toward Ariana. "The truth came from a young woman, a healer, the daughter of a man I wronged. She saved my son's life when no one else could, and she asked for nothing in return." Every camera in the room clicked, but Vincenzo didn't look away. He continued, "I thought healing was about strength, but it's about forgiveness. And if the law decides my life must end behind bars, I accept it. Because for the first time, I am free." He bowed his head, and the room went completely silent. Outside the courthouse that later day, the news was everywhere. Mafia boss sentenced to life, calls it his cure. Reporters tried to chase Ariana, but she refused interviews. When asked for comment, she simply said, "Justice isn't revenge. It's healing what pain destroyed." Weeks passed. The city slowly returned to rhythm, but its pulse felt different now. The Marino name was no longer feared. It was spoken with a kind of disbelief, like a legend fading into memory. Matteo, now fully recovered, started volunteering at a community clinic under a new name, Matthew Rossi. He refused the protection of guards or the wealth left behind. He wanted to start over, like the people his father had hurt. And one afternoon, fate found him again. Ariana was working her hospital shift when she saw a familiar face walk in through the sliding doors. He wore plain clothes, carrying a box of donated medical supplies. When he turned, their eyes met, and for a moment, the world went silent again. "Matteo," she whispered. He smiled softly. "Actually, it's Matthew now." She crossed her arms, pretending to be stern. "You think changing your name erases the past?" He shook his head. "No, but it helps me build a future that's mine." Their eyes softened. For months, both had lived under the weight of choices that weren't their own. Her father's death, his father's sins, and now, standing face to face again, the weight began to lift. "I heard what you told the press," he said gently, "about justice being healing." She looked away. "It's what my dad would have wanted." He nodded. "And it's what my father's learning, one day at a time. He writes to me every week from prison. He says you gave him his soul back.